Hi class, Miss Johnson. This is Latasha Woods, and I'm actually doing this screen capture on our third presentation for this class. And it is a little late, and I am pushing for a lot of time, so I'm just going to get right to it. Pretty much, this is involving Jason and Mark, where these guys were drinking in rough housing at a bar per se. And Jason dares Mark to punch him. And Jason is like, oh, come on, man, I bet I can take it. And Mark refuses. Jason grabs Mark's wrist and yanks Mark's arm towards Jason's stomach. Mark pulls his arm away and punches Jason in the face, breaks his jaw, and knocks out his teeth. Jason decides to sue for assault. Okay, in my mind, I'm looking at this as just something that was two guys drunk at a bar, and they were just pretty much playing around, and it was just an accident. That's the way I look at it. But for my search, I chose the jurisdiction of Maryland, just a random state. And in my search box in Westlaw, this is what I used here. I don't know if you all can see it. I'll just pull it up just a little. I typed accident assault, and then I put in quotation marks, 2 men, /P for inside parentheses as LIA, LIA with the exclamation point, which will give me a search of liability and liable, etc. And then I put in parentheses intoxicate injury, both with the exclamation points, which will bring out intoxication, intoxicated, and injury would be injured, injury, however you may look at it. And then at the end, I put withdraw in this term and consent. Okay, and then when I hit enter, it brought up originally like 1,017 cases, but I went over and I narrowed my search by clicking on reported because I want all my cases to be reported. And then I hit civil. I clicked on civil because I wanted all civil cases, because this looks like the case between Jason and Mark. It seems like it pretty much, when it say Jason sues for assault, this is a civil case. So I wanted all my cases to come up as civil cases instead of criminal. And this is the second case is the case that I did choose. Janelson's versus Budden. Okay, I click on here. And this is this Court of Special Appeals of Maryland, Harry Janelson versus Stephen Paul Budden. And honestly, guys, I've gone through this opinion just a little because when it was about an hour ago when I found this case, and I really did not have time to go through the entire opinion and jot down my notes like I usually do. So I guess you say that you guys are learning just with me. You know, I'm learning along with explaining this to you guys. So I'm just pretty much like, you guys just kind of be patient with me. But I did highlight some key sections in here. I do have a PowerPoint. I don't think I'm going to be able to use the PowerPoint because I don't know how to maneuver from my PowerPoint slides to Westlaw. So I'm just going to talk through it and just pretty much do the best that I can. So I hope you guys just be patient with me. So basically what I did, the legal questions that were asked: can Mark argue that Jason gave consent? Well, I'm going ahead of myself, guys. Okay. This case, Janelson versus Budden, basically, let me read it for you. Harry Janelson, he's the appellant. He's the one that's making an appeal, has appealed from a judgment entered against him in Circuit Court of Baltimore County in a civil battery action instituted by Stephen Budden, who is the appellee. After a non-jury trial, the court awarded $15,750 in compensatory damages to Budden, but denied his request for punitive damages. So, excuse me, guys, I have a cold as well, so if I cough, you guys please excuse me. Pretty much on June 28th, 1991, Janelson's was a patron of the Manor Tavern where Budden worked as a barback. After Janelson had consumed enough alcohol either to pass out or fall asleep at the bar, Mark Green, who is the owner of the establishment, instructed Budden to help escort Janelson to his car. Several other patrons assisted in the process and agreed to drive Janelson home. Before the group reached the vehicle, Janelson walked unassisted to a nearby fence, urinated, and walked back to his car. Although Janelson admittedly had no memory of the events, it is apparent that he did not want anyone to force him into his car, nor did he want anyone to drive it for him. When Budden had the customers try to push Janelson into the back seat of his car, Janelson resisted, started shouting and cursing and doing all these threats and stuff. As Budden attempted to put Janelson's legs in the car, Janelson kicked Budden in his face. As a result, Budden lost a tooth and suit followed. Okay. As at the conclusion of the trial, Janelson moved for judgment. He argued that Budden had assumed the risk of injury by attempting to force Janelson in the car. Judge Barbara Kerr Howe disagreed and denied Janelson's motion. She concluded that Janelson was liable for civil battery and rendered judgment in favor of Budden. So basically, this guy, the plaintiff, Harry Janelson, he was drunk at this bar, and Mr. Stephen Budden was actually an employee at the bar, and Mark Green, who is the owner of the bar, had asked Mr. Budden to help Janelson go to his car, help him, get into his car, and other patrons there was going to help him assist him in the car as well as drive his car home because he was drunk. And in the process of Mr. Budden trying to get Mr. Janelson in his vehicle, Mr. Janelson started getting irate and ended up kicking Mr. Budden in his face. And my assumption, I don't know, just by reading this, it probably could have been an accident, but with the cursing and everything, it could have been intentionally. So I'm not for sure. But basically, in the trial, the judge did agree that Janelson was at fault, and she did reward Mr. Budden the monetary means for the damages to his tooth. So in this situation, relating this particular case to the Jason and Mark case, the legal questions that were asked was basically, can Mark, in this Mark and Jason case, can he argue that Jason gave consent? Now, in this situation, I didn't quite understand the language to all of this. Now, maybe if I spent a couple hours or so just really reading and getting out key notes, I would understand this a little bit better. But again, I'm learning this as I go because I'm really pushing for time here. But just looking at this, pretty much consent is just saying that a consent occurs when a plaintiff manifests a willingness that the defendant engage in conduct and the defendant acts in response to such manifestation. Consent may be inferred from words, actions, or inactions, if reasonably understood by another to indicate consent, even if not expressly communicated to the actor. But consent must be knowingly, intelligently given, and not to be the result of fraud and incompetency. So there was no consent in this case given by the plaintiff, but when I read on, I highlight it right here, in the simplest form, assumption of the risk means that the plaintiff has given his express consent to relieve the defendant of an obligation to exercise care for his protection and agreed to take his chances as injury from a known or possible risk. So even though this plaintiff did not give formal consent to Mr. Budden to help put him in his car, the Mr. Budden, assumed the responsibility of, getting the risk because he was really doing it for this guy's protection, and I think that's what the judge was looking at as far as consent. So I will kind of relate this to Jason and Mark. Now just reading the situation with Jason and Mark, Jason did give Mark the consent to punch him in his stomach, but he ended up punching him in his face, but it was by accident, in my opinion, just by looking at this. So I don't think consent would have any relevancy in this case here, with Mark and with Jason and Mark as well. This second question, could Jason counter that he was authorized? Could Jason, what's this? Could Jason counter that he only authorized a stomach punch? And still no, because to me, it's still an assault, regardless. Mark actually refused to hit him, and I guess the position where Jason grabs his wrist, and once Mark yanked, like, man, come on, don't do that, and he yanked, you know, it was like, okay, this was a total accident. So no, I don't think that that will, you know, have any bearings on that case either. And this last question, could Jason counter that his intoxication negated his request? And that is definitely cut and dry in this case here. That is a definitely no. Because I've read, I think I have that highlighted right here. Voluntary drunkenness is not a defense to general intent crime, including second-degree murder. In a tort action, a person who negligently or intentionally becomes intoxicated must be held to the same standard of conduct as a sober person. So pretty much relating this to Jason and Mark's situation, no, Jason could not counter that his intoxication negated his request, because regardless of whether you're drunk or not, you know, that has no bearings on it. You know, it pretty much says so with this situation here. And with this particular case with Janelson versus Budden, the judge actually agreed with the court, and he affirmed it. And what does it say? Right in here, judgment affirmed, costs be paid 1/2 by the appellant and 1/2 by the appellee. Pretty much. That's pretty much my conclusion on this. I wish I put a little bit more effort and time into this. It's after midnight, and this was supposed to be turned in at 11:30, and I'm really just trying to rush through it. And I really truly apologize for not putting the very best into this, because I'm always trying to, especially with the PowerPoint slides, I'm always trying to make these beautiful slides and make it a little bit more presentable. But this pretty much concludes this presentation for this Jason and Mark theory. And I appreciate you guys for being patient with me. Thank you.